Welcome to Wayward Muse, the media company that invites you to travel through drinks. I'm Steven, your host. This show is made possible from our listeners. If you enjoy having insights into the industry from award-winning restaurateurs, consider donating at yourwaywardmuse.com, where you will find Season 1 of our web series. As a thank you for listening, we are offering 10% off our entire store. Just use code ListenToYourMuse for discounts on our merch inspired by the paper plane cocktail and the bar tools you need to succeed. This episode is brought to you by Salsa Matcha by Chef Rishi. Salsa Matcha is the nutty, do-anything sauce you didn't know you needed. It hails from the state of Veracruz in Mexico. It'll completely shake up your taste buds and your cooking. Brighten up your dishes with 3 different expressions of this must-have, flavorful product. Personally, I put it on everything. And I mean everything. Have it delivered anywhere in the US. Just go to yourwaywardmuse.com/matcha by Rishi. I wanted to welcome Josh Harris to the podcast. You may have known him from his bar Quik Dog, the James Beard award-winning bar known for its menu design in San Francisco. Josh, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Good to be with you.
Josh, I wanted to understand what it might have been like for you and the people at Quik Dog while you were going through the pandemic in San Francisco. Can you walk us through your journey?
Yeah, I'm sure that Quik Dog has had an experience very similar to bars all around the country. Of course, guidelines and regulations in each city and each state make the chronology of these things a little bit different. But in the middle of March, we figured we had to close our businesses and do it in a fairly permanent or long-term kind of way. Although most of us on our team would have maybe thought it would have been a couple months, 3 months. We just all are going to go stay in our houses, and a few months later, we're going to come and reopen the businesses, and everybody's going to go back to work, and everything is going to be the same. That's obviously not what happened, but at the beginning of all this, I think that was what was on everybody's mind. We stayed closed at Quik Dog for about 6 months and didn't do anything. No to-go, no store, no nothing like that until the middle of September when we reopened. To say the least, has been scary and sad, but also we are grateful that we haven't closed permanently. And in the case of Quik Dog, have come back with something that is, getting us a little further down the road.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you all have figured out a way to morph and change your business model to get through this pandemic. Did you think that the way that you set up your menu helped you to kind of be ready to shift and pivot?
It's funny that you bring that up, because while there is a very similar mindset that we were in when we were exploring Quik Dog, which is the concept that we opened in the Quik Dog space, there was a lot about flipping the menu at Quik Dog, quote unquote, that we wanted to distance ourselves from. It's funny that when we got to January of this year, I joked with Katie, who works with me, that we could have flipped this entire thing again like it was a Quik Dog menu and opened an entirely different to-go and delivery concept, themed out and kind of a caricature of itself. And it would have been the 2021 version of a Quik Dog menu flip. But we were very used to doing a complete 180 and switching things around. So there, of course, were some similarities with reopening that we benefited from having done it before.
And how do you, just so people understand, Quik Dog is lauded for its menu development and the way that you changed menus around very often during the year, creating really fantastic designs. Could you possibly break one down for us and explain your process in creating new menus?
Sure. So we do 2 menus a year. Well, I'm speaking in the present tense because surely we will be speaking about it like this again. But prior to the pandemic and in the future, we have a 2 menu a year schedule, and those menus launch on January 8th and on July 7th. We felt in San Francisco that there were not 4 seasons, that there were really only 2. And, at least from a flavor perspective here in San Francisco. And a 6-month period of time for us, we felt like was an amount of time that people could come and enjoy a cocktail menu as like a body of work and a body of flavor, where they could navigate their way through the menu, start with the drinks they were comfortable with, work their way through to the drinks that they needed to explore for the first time, find ones that they loved, find ones that they wanted to come back for, build a relationship with those drinks, and so on. We didn't feel like that could happen in a 3-month period of time, that was too quick. So prior to Trick Dog opening in 2013, one of the things that we knew we were doing was that we were going to do a menu every 6 months. We also knew that we weren't going to do a menu on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper or any similar format of menu that typically was the way that sort of information was presented. And the first menu that we landed on was a little bit of an aha moment, where we had a number of like Ben Moore paint guides and Pantone paint guides lying around our build site at Trick Dog. That aha moment was that would be a great way to present cocktail menu. And definitely we weren't the first people that figured out that would be a great way to present the menu, because Kalu Calais had done it before, but we just didn't know that. We actually did it differently than they had done it, which I think is kind of cool to see how conceptually 2 people can be inspired by the same thing, but it comes to life in different ways. But that first menu was in the form of a Pantone color guide. We felt like a lot of the names of paint colors that we were seeing made really great cocktail names. And that was one of the things that helped seal the form, is that we started combing through all of the names of colors and just picking out names that we thought would make a great cocktail name, with no other context other than that being a cool name. And once we had that list, we started to, sort of sort and organize and discard. And concurrently, we were creating the menu that was to become the first cocktail menu at Trick Dog, the recipe portion of it. And then we started matching those up. And so all of the names of the drinks on the first menu were actual paint color names. We weren't doing anything like matching the colors of the drinks to the paint colors or anything like that, but they were actual paint colors. And that menu was really well received. It was cool. Like, it was a cool form. It functioned really well, which in talks that I do about our menus, I point a lot to the Pantone menu and how it functions, and how it was a success in terms of our model of service, which of course we didn't premeditate. It was luck at the time, but we learned how great that menu was afterwards through the challenges and failures of other menus that we had. But that menu sort of kicked us down a road that we hadn't necessarily planned for. And 6 months later, we were like, oh man, what are we going to do now? And we did another menu. And then, 3 years later, it was like, oh wow, we're doing one of these every 6 months. And, here we are, 8 years old. We've done a lot of menus. And, eventually over time, they became pretty grand flips, changes of food, changes of some decor, changes of art, changes of smallwares, not becoming an entirely new business. That wasn't the thing, but really changing everything that we could in line with the theme of the menu. Also building in pretty significant charitable components to our menus, which fits into some of our philanthropic values across our company. We were able to use the menus as a way to raise money for some of the things that we wanted to support, and sell the menus, connect with a lot of artists, and so on. So it became a lot bigger and a lot cooler to us than we would have expected when we made that first Pantone menu, but it became the thing that really marked Trick Dog. It's sort of, singular greatest identity point, I think, is those menus.
I mean, it's a lot of the first things that I read about were the menus, and I find a lot of great inspiration from going from a color palette and using it as your first way of painting your restaurant and making a statement. That kind of gave me a bunch of ideas. And I think that's the mark of a truly great source of inspiration, is it can carry on and inspire others. Where else do you draw your inspirations from when it comes to your menus, your restaurant, and your company at large, Bon Vivants?
I'd say it changes over time. I look back at the things that I thought were cool in 2013, and then the things that I thought were cool in 2015, 2018, 2021, and so on. They're all different from one another, particularly in the case of Trick Dog and the calendar of reinvention that we built into the way of doing things there. That gave us an opportunity to evolve with our evolving perspective of what was cool, or what we thought was cool, very naturally. I think with respect to the company as a whole, it's harder. You build an identity for something, and during the time of the pandemic, I've actually given a lot of thought to what it is that I think is cool and where I take my inspiration from, and how different that is from when the business was started. What things I would want to inflect on it now, how do I do that, what's the best way to do it, but probably no different than many others, in that it's about the world around me and the things that I see, the things I'm inspired by, certainly by design, certainly by objects and by art. I have a side hobby business of finding, sourcing, selling, and collecting vintage items of all kind, and I'd say that certainly is an inspiration to me, the study of those things and how I can employ them into everything else that I'm doing, either the idea of them or them actually.
Yeah, I found your page that has a lot of those reused and antique style items really fascinating to see, kind of just your perspective, because different things catch different people's eyes, right? And I think there was just one like closet cabinet that you found, and you were just really interested in just how simple and basic and functional it was. And sometimes that's really all you need from an object.
Totally. I really like that you were drawn to that shelf, because I really like that shelf too. It was very simple. The brackets were like inlaid into it. The shelves could be configured in different heights. It was clean. It was old. It was strong. Form and function is really important. Obviously, I'm not anywhere close to the first person to emphasize that relationship, but I am definitely a person that will champion its importance, and that's a relationship that needs to be the foundation at a bar or a restaurant. Certainly, it was the foundation of all of our menu creation, of the thing that we were striving for. It has to look good, but it also has to work. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't matter how it looks. But also, looking good makes the fact that it works have that extra thing. Finding that relationship and the balance between those things is important. And with respect to the vintage items that I like, many of them are utilitarian. I mean, I like something that just sits on the shelf as much as the next guy, but when I find something that is like functional sculpture, to me, that is a very cool thing to have.
And I think that was one of my first aha moments in the restaurant world, is when because sometimes you kind of get carried away in the idea of like, oh, this is an art, this is, I'm creating this thing. But then there's that aha moment eventually in your bartending career where you realize, oh, this is a craft. I have to make sure that this does its job. And first and foremost, it has to taste good and give the guest an experience before it does really anything else.
Agreed. And I think that there's a lot of layers to that, because, we could talk about just the drink itself and how it's constructed, what type of glass it goes in, what the garnish is like, or whether it gets a straw, or, those sorts of technical things. But also, what does the bar look like and how does it function? What does the restaurant look like and how does it function? How is it laid out? I mean, layout is a huge component of form and function together, design challenge of different restaurants. And so there's really micro, and then there's really macro with respect to hospitality projects, bars, restaurants, and the things that they offer there.
So for bar layout, just as a general question, did you say that you would have any like cardinal rules for laying out a bar? They might have changed now because, it's 2021 and we just went through one of the craziest pandemics in a century. But I would just be interested to know what your opinion is as to form and function of an actual space.
Trick Dog is a very well laid out bar, and it serves the room and the style of how people interact with the space, the manner of it, all really well. There was a little bit of luck in that. And we've designed a couple other bars since then. One of them, Bon Voyage, is another place that I own. And in some regards, the bar is very similar to the one at Trick Dog. But in other ways, there are some differences. And those differences turned out to be, they made for really big challenges at that bar. And things that we thought would be the right decisions or were the right decisions for certain reasons, but without regard for other parts that we should have considered, became challenging. Things about like depth of the counter, distance between wells, and distance between the back bar, and things like that. How that connects the bar with the room, what relationship the bartenders would have with the people on the other side of the bar and the people on the other side of the room, and what that would do for the energy of the space. I don't have the golden layout, but what I do know is that there are always things that you can't think of, and no place is exactly the same. Even when you think it's exactly the same, it's not exactly the same. So, there are, of course, things that are like standard. We raise the equipment up a little bit. We bring the counter closer. We try and do certain things that we feel like are better for the positioning of the bartender, better for their posture, things of that nature to help their physical longevity and to be faster and more efficient. But beyond that, there are things that were seemingly innocuous decisions that turned out to have, big consequences, I guess, that we hadn't considered in the case of Bon Voyage.
Such as?
Specifically, the depth of the countertop at Bon Voyage. There are some other things, but specifically that. And the space at Bon Voyage is pretty big, certainly big compared to Trick Dog. Big, as far as San Francisco cocktail bar type sizes go. Mm-hmm. And it was important for us when we took over the space, when we bought the business from the previous owner, that we were like, how do we make this room feel more intimate so that the energy gets harnessed in a better way than what we felt like the layout was before? And so one of the things that we did was we built the bar bigger. We pushed it out into the room a little bit. We made the countertop bigger, deeper, and it looked beautiful. And it also really accomplished that thing that I described, where you look at it and you're like, oh, this feels like it has taken up more space in a really positive way, and that it's going to push people to be in sort of like the right degree of intimacy and proximity with one another. And when it came time to serve guests night after night after night, and, you look at the nuances of things, I realized that the bartenders and the customers had too much distance between one another. Maybe now it's going to be something that's all right, but
it might be the new thing. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. But at the time, it was something that it was hard. I mean, like the physical part of just getting the drink over to the person or pulling back that empty glass, but more so, there was an interpersonal connectivity that I felt like had a little bit of a barrier to it. This is we're talking subtleties here. I mean, these are the sorts of things that maybe a guest doesn't realize or doesn't pinpoint, but when you see these things night in and night out, and then particularly having the comparison of a place like Trick Dog, where, really it just so many things hit off of luck, or just sort of guessing the right choices and not knowing that they were great with respect to certain parts of it until you had contrast to something else. Trick Dog is a very intimate place, which also now in 2021 might be a really big challenge for us. In the case of Bon Voyage, that depth was really hard. And we're talking about you don't know that. You're like, oh, well, let's add another 12 inches to the bar top. You don't get a do-over on that. And you don't get to take it for a test drive. Nor did we ever think that that would be a consequence of it. So, same equipment layout and things like that. If I had a do-over there, I probably would have done it a little bit different.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you never know until you try it. I've worked at a couple bars where, luckily, because of my height, it wasn't an issue, but I had some members on the staff who definitely struggled to hand off drinks, and it was just one of those things that the guest may never know, but the bartenders will, of course, certainly know.
Mm-hmm.
You had spoken about Trick Dog and its intimacy, and I believe I read it somewhere that you said just because somebody says you can do something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. I know that there have been some times where there's been chances to possibly open and let Trick Dog exist again, but you had said that maybe that wouldn't be the best thing because then Trick Dog wouldn't have that same feeling that we've been discussing.
It's been a battle in my mind and continues to be one, particularly because of the roller coaster of regulations and guidelines that are happening. For context, at 1:15 today, the mayor of San Francisco, in response to alteration of state guidelines, announced that come Thursday, outdoor dining would again commence. Recently, and for several weeks now, California had a ban on outdoor dining, which is very strict compared to the rest of the country right now. But also, there's been huge caseloads. But so he was constantly trying to take this information in and figure out the right thing to do. When we were contemplating what the best thing for Trick Dog to do was, something that I kept on saying was, just because the city says we can do it doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. Just because we can build a parklet doesn't mean we should build a parklet. Just because we can do to-go cocktails a certain way doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do, and so on and so forth. And it really, in sort of making sure that that continued to echo in our conversations, it forced us to think about what the right thing for Trick Dog to do was from the point of view of health and safety and for the health of the business, and not to be reactionary, because there's a little bit of a sort of frenzy and excitement with what was happening with a lot of the changes around things. And so there were policies that were being put in place, or relaxation of certain laws, that many people in the bar and restaurant business around the country were like, these are great changes. These are great changes. These are changes that we shouldn't have had to have a pandemic in order to have put in place. The sort of like reverse of puritanical ways of doing things that are holdovers from the prohibition. And so there was a combination of, well, this is great. I can serve to-go drinks, and we're bleeding money, paying rent, trying to figure out what to do. And so let's just sell them. That wasn't always the best move for everyone. It's really been the great individualizer. Cocktail bars around the country, in my opinion, looked very similar and operated very similar. And policies that changed or got relaxed around the country were all very similar in a lot of sort of major cities and maybe even everywhere. But to my earlier point, just because you can do something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. And what is great for Death & Co. might not be great for PDT, might not be great for Anvil, might be great for Trick Dog. And, but I firmly have believed throughout the pandemic that the policies that were put in place or relaxed were only tools that bars and restaurants could use when making a plan to do the thing that's best for their business. Doing the policies wasn't just the best thing for the business. Bars and restaurants needed to figure out the best thing for their business and then use those resources that were at their disposal to try and get there, which of course wasn't very much and still very challenging for people. But we really had to give a thought with Trick Dog to what the best thing is for us. We had the same resources available as everybody else, but how everybody used them and what they decided to do with them was all very different.
Which leads us very naturally into what you did decide to do, which was kind of take one part of the business that you had and amplify it and adjust it for the times that we were in Quik Dog. What was that transition like, going from, bustling cocktail bar to a food-driven delivery business for this new time?
I was frustrated around the idea of doing Trick Dog not as Trick Dog. And after 8 years and really having a firm identity that people really understood the hallmarks of what Trick Dog was, that to do something that wasn't that was something that I couldn't get my head around. I didn't want to. It was like every way that I looked at it, it felt like a square peg in a round hole. There were certain businesses, for example, that I felt were more naturally able to adapt to the styles of service that were required or allowed based on pandemic guidelines. Things related to the type of street that they were on, what their sidewalk setup was, were they on a corner, what their frontage was like, did they have outdoor space before, did people go there during the day, what types of drinks did they have. I'm sure that you also have in your mind that there were certain places that you're like, oh, this is killer. Their whole setup is super cool, and they have all these parts of their business or surrounding physical layout that allowed for what they did to work. And then there are others that just didn't lend themselves to that. Being in a sort of like a small, cramped, two-story industrial warehouse type space in the Mission District, like didn't easily translate to like outdoor chillin' spritz vibes.
Yeah, I could see how that would be a challenge.
Yeah.
Definitely a different perspective trying to get from a crammed space to try and morph into something. There are some places that totally just came out of nowhere and were like, oh no, this is fine. Like I know somebody down in the south side of Chicago. It's a place, little beer bar called the Lulu. He knew a lot of carpenters, and they literally just built out a ton of 5x7 like huts, just threw them up. And it's crazy that, honestly, really inspiring. I think how quickly the restaurant industry is all just actually, nope, we're just going to pivot this way. We're going to figure out this way. And it kind of speaks to me about the longevity that our industry has been able to continuously grow and achieve. And I feel like it's going to be akin to prohibition when we look back on it and explain it to others, but it'll just be one of those things where like, yeah, we had really shitty cocktails for a while because of prohibition, or yeah, we didn't have indoor dining, so we built a bunch of different buildings, or we shifted our food menu around. But
totally. And people are going to look back and say, when did it happen that every space had a secondary structure in the parking spots in front of their businesses? When did that become standard? It's like, well, in the great pandemic of 2020.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody got a temporary parklet permit that never fucking went away.
Yeah. No, every single year you're going to see tents just randomly appear because they already paid for them.
Yeah. But so in contemplation of all of that, I felt freed when I arrived at the idea, why contemplate something that does not lend itself to what we're being allowed to do? Why not design something specifically for the parameters that we're being allowed to do? We were never a to-go and delivery business before. We didn't do it for food. We didn't do it for cocktails. Why not create a business that is designed specifically with that intention? And once we started to go down that rabbit hole, it became really exciting, frankly, to flex those creative parts that we don't often get to do. Certainly got to do around menus, but not necessarily around the entrepreneurial part of it. And there's been a lot about the arrival at the concept of Quik Dog and its finessing it and bringing it to life that really is more than just serving during the pandemic, but is also us taking this as an opportunity to explore a new business concept and its viability, incubate it as a brand, build an Instagram following, see if people want the food, figure out how to package it, what happens to our fries when they sit in a box, how do we make that better, how do we deliver a burger to you over a period of time that's good 40 minutes from now, when all we thought about before was what happens when you put it on a plate and give it to you immediately. And so in the long run, Quik Dog will not live forever at Trick Dog, but maybe when we come out of this, Quik Dog will find a permanent home in a place where the economics of it makes sense for that type of business. maybe we'll, get the opportunity to look at different places and airports, or some new project where it makes sense for it to be a part of, an office building, or, who knows, maybe we'll be in the Giants ballpark, or, something cool like that. But I'll admit with Quik Dog that we have looked at square in the eye confidently, because we believe that there is more of a benefit to us than just the revenue, and that the opportunity for us to explore this business concept also has value, and that now is the shits that why not try something? Because what are our other opportunities to be able to try it? You get a truck, you do a pop-up, what opportunities do you get to do something like that? And so that's been very cool, but I don't know. I don't know if we could do it forever, because eventually we'll have to make some real money. So I'm hoping that we can all get back to, hanging and drinking together. But I think it's really important to note that, again, back to what the city says you can do. The city saying that people can go back into bars and eat and drink the way that they used to will only be one part of this equation. The other part of it, and particularly in the case of Trick Dog, will be 80 people's willingness to pack into a bar that holds 50 people, laugh, tell stories, drink, bump into one another, and do that 7 nights a week in order for that to work. And if that can't work because we all don't feel comfortable doing it, then we'll also have to contemplate doing something different at Trick Dog, which would not be Quik Dog and might not be Trick Dog either.
It's going to be an interesting year for sure, just from different timetables of vaccinations and then people's acceptance of social change once again. It's definitely something where we all don't have the answer to it. Well, I think we also touched on one other thing that I think is important. Looking ahead, there are some parameters that you have to meet, but do you foresee Trick Dog coming back maybe by the end of the year, or what steps concretely are you looking for?
The timing of your question is serendipitous, and this is a hot topic in my brain right now. With the next round of PPPs coming, my optimism that we're going to get one and that we're going to be able to use some of those funds in this case to help build, an outdoor service area, a parklet, or whatever it is that we want to build out there. There is some contemplation in my mind about how Trick Dog could evolve its service from what it was before in order to still be cool to me, cool to you, and to those people that used to love it, and also people that haven't been there yet, but also safe actually, and safe feeling. Are there things that we can do now that don't narrow our possibilities when we still don't know exactly how this is all going to shake out, but wanting to make decisions, right? And wanting to be prepared. That's on my brain a lot right now. I am excited for the time when Trick Dog, the place at 3010 20th Street in San Francisco, becomes a convivial drinking establishment again. But exactly the form that takes, I'm not sure. I'm optimistic that it's going to happen in 2021 for the sake of good outdoor vibes in San Francisco. We have nice weather late in the year and all of that, but I'm not in a rush. I don't want to rush it. I don't want to be the first through the door. I want to do it right. I want to be safe. I want to set us up to, to do the things that are right for us when we know what those are. But I'm excited for when that comes and when Trick Dog becomes its next version of itself.
I think that's a great perspective to have. There is a sense of frenzy that happens at a lot of restaurants when regulations are adjusted. So I hope that you're able to achieve something really spectacular if you decide to do outdoor dining. I know if I was in San Francisco, I would definitely want to pop a seat out in your patio.
I will say that my other bar, Bon Voyage, is on a street that, has some challenges of like action and energy and cleanliness and cars, and it's like a major street in the Mission. And that's part of what makes it cool, and also part of what makes it sad at times. And then each block is different, right? Like some blocks are like really awesome, and some blocks just like, are really dirty. And then some blocks are like where the wind just like blows all of the stuff and so on. And, we've done a lot of talking about Trick Dog, and it's easy even for me to get stuck into that thinking about Trick Dog. But Bon Voyage is at a very different place in its life. It was about a year and a half old, and there's still a lot that needs to happen at Bon Voyage in order to achieve financial success and security. It's been a great feat in some ways that business has weathered the storm this far. We've had a fortunate negotiation with our landlord that gave us some breathing room. We were able to arrive to some terms that worked for both of us in the interest of him continuing to have a tenant and a business that could survive there, and us being able to, sort of be able to be a business tomorrow when that works. But eventually, we're going to have to reopen this business that really wasn't nearly as solidified in its life and in its identity as Trick Dog was. And that is exciting, but also scary in that if you really get down to the core of it, it's like if I got to reopen a bar that had been open for 1.5 years and then take all of the things that I learned about it in the 1.5 years and then act on those things when I reopened it, this would be a great opportunity to do that. Now, it's not as it's easier said than done, of course. Certain things cost money, certain things are, physical that you can't change and whatnot. But and of course, lots of things have to go through the filter of post-pandemic service and how any of those things will change. But there is a great opportunity for us at Bon Voyage to reinvent certain components of that business. I've even contemplated reinventing it entirely, even as far as a new name, new style of service, new vibes and food and all of it. I'm not quite at the 23rd hour yet, but I know that we're getting closer to having to pick a direction with that as well.
It's exciting to see that you still have all these different ruminations and ideas swirling around your head and how to proceed. I've come away from this conversation inspired and thinking about different places where I draw my inspiration from.
It's been fun talking to you.
It's been a pleasure. Now, I do have one last question that I've asked most of my guests, and I think that it's timely. Based on everything that we've experienced through the past year, if you could pick a couple things in regards to what you think should stay the same about the restaurant industry and what things that we have an opportunity to change, if you had a perfect world and control over them, what would you change?
Well, I would lower the cost of alcohol. I would pay everybody more that works for us. I would hope that people would all feel comfortable paying more for what they have at all of our establishments. I say those things, halfway joking, but also sort of serious. I think that there is a really big challenge that hospitality is facing. I've shared thoughts with this with a number of different restaurateurs over the time of the pandemic, but this is a very fragile industry. And its fragility is financially based. And there is a whole lot of operation financially that occurs for the slim, statistically, possibility of making a really small amount of money. There are a number of different levers that people talk about that could be pulled in order to change that. But we're really talking about global macro changes to the way that we do things. The amount of money that people are paid to work, tip culture, all of the fact that this is also different city by city and county by county, all across the country, workforce, workplace, health, what people feel like they should pay to do certain things and what the challenges that then come along with as operators are in order to sort of, meet people's expectations. So there's a lot of challenges there, and I'm hoping that when we come out of the other side of this, I know that it's not going to a complete change, but I'm hoping that there is going to be some significant changes that enough bar and restaurant people around the country all get on board with to really sort of help our guests get on the same page as us to contribute to a more secure bar and restaurant landscape. It's like the same way that everybody got on board with teaching people that they could drink bitter things or that martinis were good or that, just because it had sugar didn't mean that it was sweet, but that it was balanced. I think that we can have a global effort to also let people into our struggle in a way that doesn't alienate them and make the guests that come to the restaurants that keep them alive also a part of their continued success and prosperity.